Hi, my name is Nick Ballou. I'm a patent attorney. I was recently speaking to a class of student entrepreneurs at the University of North Dakota about how intellectual property can help their businesses. And one of the entrepreneurs asked me, he said, "My product is a combination of existing components. Can I get a patent for that?" And I thought that was a really good question because I think a lot of patents go to new combinations of existing components. So, it's a really common area of invention. And the technical answer to that question of whether you can get a patent for a new combination of existing components is whether the patent office thinks the combination is obvious or not. If the patent office thinks that the combination is obvious, then you do not get a patent. But if the patent office thinks that the combination is not obvious, then you do get a patent. However, if you're not a patent attorney and if you're not working with the patent office, it's hard to know, what do they think is obvious or not. So it's kind of a difficult test to know. So I did a little bit of research and I came up with a list of some factors that I think you can consider in determining whether the patent office may think that your combination of existing components is patentable or not. So the first factor I have is, are the components being combined in a new way to achieve a new result? So if you're combining the components in a way that hasn't been combined before, and if you're achieving a result that hasn't been achieved before, then that would tend to be not obvious and that maybe you could get a patent for that combination. Two, are the results of the combination unexpected? I think an example that could be is if you go to a pharmacy and you look at the cold medicine, most of the cold medicine, maybe they have 2 to 5 ingredients and they're just in different combinations of these different ingredients. And so if each of these ingredients separately can help relieve symptoms of a cold and you're combining them, then the expectation would be that, you're just getting the effects of all these helping with your cold. So that would be expected. But if you happen to combine, 5 ingredients that each of them individually may cause drowsiness, but if you combine them and then there is no drowsiness, then maybe that's an unexpected result, and then that would tend to be not obvious. So if you have an unexpected result from the combination, that can help you get a patent. 3, did any of the components need to be reconstructed or redesigned? So if you don't need to change any of the components, you can just use them straight off the shelf. They don't need to be modified in any way. Then that would tend to be obvious. However, if you need to change some of the components, modify them, reconstruct them, redesign them a little bit, then that would tend to be not obvious. 4, do any of the components function or operate differently when combined? So if you're using components and you're using them in the same way that they're normally used, then that would tend to be obvious. But if you're using an old component in a new way in this new combination, then that would tend to be not obvious. 5, are there any technological difficulties in combining the components? So if it's real straightforward to combine the components and there's no difficulty, that would tend to be obvious. But if it's kind of challenging and you need to work on it, and maybe the invention is kind of how do you put these components together, and there are problems with that, and you solve the problems. So that's the invention, is figuring out the difficulties in combining the components. 6, is this a simple substitution of one component for another known component to have the same function, or is the component being used for a different function? So let's say if you had a gas-powered car and you just wanted to put an electric engine in it. So people know that you can use either a gas engine or electric engine in a car. So if you just swap one component with a kind of a substitute that does the same thing, that would tend to be obvious. But say you use something instead of an engine to run the car, use a component for a new use and the existing combination, then that would tend to be not obvious. 7, would the patent examiner need to use the invention as a roadmap to combine many references, i.e. improper hindsight analysis? This is something I like to use. Sometimes patent examiners, when they get your invention, they'll do a prior art search and they'll find these prior art documents to use to reject your invention. And if they need to use many prior art documents, say 10, 15 documents, and they kind of just pick a little bit from here and a little bit from each of these, combine them in a very specific way, I think that probably isn't really obvious. It's that they're looking at your invention and they're, kind of piecing together those 15 references to say that it's obvious. So, that's if it's a really complicated rejection using a lot of references, then I would think that would tend to be not obvious. 8, other evidence of non-obviousness, commercial success, long felt but unsolved needs, or failure of others. So these are just, again, some factors that can be considered. So if you introduce a product and it's wildly successful, people love it, that means you have commercial success. That would tend to mean, that it's not obvious. If there is a long felt but unsolved needs, if the market had been wanting something for a long time and it wasn't out there, and then you came up with this new combination, that would tend to be not obvious. And then failure of others, if others have tried to do work in this area, but they haven't been able to combine the elements, then that would tend to be not obvious. So next, I just wanted to give an example of some of this obviousness analysis. So this was a court case about Crocs, and the Crocs people were suing some people for infringement, and then so the defendants were saying that the Crocs were obvious, and they said that the footwear portion existed, and then all they added was this strap, and straps exist. So this combination of the footwear piece and the strap are obvious. And then what Croc was saying was that the footwear portion is this foam material, and they're using an elastic strap. And normally in footwear, you use a strap that isn't elastic, that's solid and doesn't move around to keep the foot in position. But in their case, because of the foam footwear and the foot and the friction and moving around a little bit, the elastic portion is unexpectedly a good fit for this product. And so choosing that elastic strap and putting on that footwear was an unexpected result, and the combination was not obvious. So Croc won on that. So even though the strap was known and the footwear portion were known, this unexpected result made the Croc not obvious. And then, so in summary, I have a few practical tips here. I think the more differences, the better. So if you have 3 components, I think that can be easier for the patent office to say it's obvious. But if you have 100 components, you have 1,000 components, it's a very detailed machine or process. I think, the more differences from what's out there, the better. 2, think about the benefits of a combination versus the separate components. So, if you get this kind of synergistic result of you combine these things and you get this unexpected good result from the combination versus just considering the individual components, then that would tend to be not obvious. And then 3, think about how complicated the thought process is to make the combination, i.e. simple substitution of a component versus thoughtful detailed plan to choose components. So again, I think if you have to do a lot of planning to make this, and you put a lot of work and thought in choosing components, and there's a lot of components, then I would think that would tend to be not obvious. But then if you kind of have an existing product and you're just kind of picking one component that may be a little better, I think that would tend to be more obvious. So none of these factors are really deciding. It's kind of a balance of all these factors, and you have to look at the facts for the individual situation. But these are some things that you can consider that I think are a little bit more helpful than just saying whether some combination is obvious or not. So if anyone has any questions or want to get in contact me, I have my contact information on the right. I have my LinkedIn, my law firm biography page, and then my Gmail. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or contact me if you have any questions. All right, thank you.